What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. The Week 5 action absolutely lived up to the hype with potentially the game of the year, maybe the game of the decade, debatably a game that will be in the discussions for a long time as potentially one of the games of the century. Huge showdown went down in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Plenty of other things to talk about, but before I get into it, if you're going to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. But starting things out, it was a big win for the Alabama Crimson Tide. They won what I think is certainly a candidate for game of the century. Certainly it's going to be up there at the end of this year for game of the year, and potentially even for this decade as well. I think it proves that in this discussion of whether these regular season games matter with the 12-team playoff, it answers the question, yes, they do very much still matter. So number 2 Georgia against number 4 Alabama, those are their rankings going into this matchup. This game absolutely delivered with a 41-34 Crimson Tide victory. The Tide go up 28-0. It was about as perfect of a first quarter and really first half as you could have asked for. They go up 21-0. I think they maybe had the ball and were starting to drive, or they were about to get it to start the second quarter. They go down and go up 28-0 with 12:32 left in the second quarter. So the first, 17 and a half minutes, it was all Alabama, all Crimson Tide. Georgia gets a touchdown late. Alabama gets a safety late as well to go up 30-7 at the half. Jalen Milroe in that first half ran and threw all over the Georgia defense. He finished the game with nearly 400 total yards, 374 passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 117 rushing and 2 touchdowns to finish with 4 total touchdowns. But Georgia was able to grind their way back into this game. They scored twice in just over 3 minutes late in the fourth quarter, and they scored 3 times in a span of 7.5 minutes in that third quarter. Carson Beck found Dylan Bell with a 67-yard strike. Bell finished the game with exactly 100 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. He actually ran one in earlier, so 1 receiving, 1 rushing. Beck finished, it was a good game in terms of passing the ball, but that might have just been because when you're coming back, you're going to be passing the ball a lot. He finished with 439 passing yards. He had a really good second half, obviously, to get those numbers, 3 touchdowns, but he also had 3 interceptions. He's had some issues here and there. He struggled a little bit against Kentucky. We'll talk more about those Wildcats here in a moment, but Carson Beck was able to play really well in the second half, and then obviously puts the Bulldogs ahead 34-33 with just over 2 minutes remaining in the game. But then I think one of the best plays on the very next play from scrimmage for Alabama, it's a throw downfield. Jalen Milroe lofts it down to the talented freshman phenom. Don't need to say his age. I think that's getting a lot of hype. Everybody knows how old Ryan Williams is. The 17-year-old receiver makes a phenomenal mid-air adjustment to kind of grab the ball, and then he has 2 defenders kind of right on him. He's running down the sideline, and he has like a little Matrix-style spin move to lose those 2 defenders. They kind of run into each other a little bit, and he speeds down the sideline, taking the mouthpiece out as he goes, and scores on an electric 75-yard touchdown. I mean, watching that game in that moment, I mean, really just watching it, I was actually kind of making dinner at the time, watching it with my wife here in my apartment. I mean, it was just such a thrilling game to watch. I mean, I can't even describe what it's like. I can't imagine having been in that environment. I've been in some pretty exciting high school games, but I don't think that comes anywhere close to what the environment was like there at Zabien Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I mean, absolutely electric. Alabama is able to get the 2-point conversion to go up 41-34. So on that catch, Ryan Williams gets his lone touchdown reception of the game. He had 6 receptions for 117 yards, and he got most of it there. Alabama had 11 different receivers in this game. None shone better than Ryan Williams did, nor have any in the rest of this season. Another kind of takeaway and observation, Kalen DeBoer delivers to answer some of the questions about following in the footsteps of Nick Saban. I think obviously there's going to be a lot of expectations on him for obvious reasons. I think Alabama fans, maybe before this game, were a little bit like, okay, maybe there'll be an adjustment period. I think this game kind of shows that maybe there won't be. A couple of questions, though. I mean, Georgia's comeback, allowing them to score as quickly as they did, as just easily, really, as they did, is a little bit, game plan question, stuff like that. How can Alabama execute better to hold on to that lead? I'm sure that was something that he talked about to the Tide and has in these first couple days of practice this week. And then it's still a question that can't really be proven till the end of this season. Is the sustained success? It's one thing to win a big game at home that you can really get your team all hyped up for, but can he carry that throughout a whole season? I think the answer to both of these questions is yes. I think he can lead the Crimson Tide to sustained success, and I think Georgia is just such a phenomenal team, and they've been a really good second half team. It's easy to forget that they were up, 6-0 or something like that. It was very low scoring against Clemson before they ran away in that second half. So Georgia's been a second half team. They've proven that in their two marquee games this year. I mean, even the game against Kentucky a little bit, they didn't play great in the second half, but really poor in the first half. So those are things there. Another big thing for the Crimson Tide, they had 4 takeaways in this game to just 1 turnover. Outside of the South Florida game, they have a +6 turnover margin. They turned the ball over 3 times in that game against the Bulls and did not grab any takeaways. So overall, they've done a really good job at taking care of the football. Aside from that one game, I think that's a little bit more of a blip than a potential trend. So the Crimson Tide have done a really good job at getting the takeaways. That's always going to be important, and so that was also a key in this game. And for Georgia and Kirby Smart, they continue to have an Alabama problem. Smart is 1-6 against the Crimson Tide during his tenure for the Bulldogs, and the only time they got that win was obviously the national championship game in 2021, correct? So there's still questions to be answered for this Crimson Tide team, and they're going to have to get these things figured out if they hope to compete with Alabama, not just this year, but moving forward. And it's a big win for Alabama. They boost their chances of making the college football playoff. With it being 12 teams, they can afford to lose a game or two now. Georgia is a little bit tighter now in terms of their wiggle room. But overall, huge win for Alabama in one of the best games that we've seen really ever in college football, certainly in recent memory. And another kind of shocking result. I don't think the Alabama game was a shocking result, their win over Georgia, but Kentucky, who is now receiving votes, gets a stunning 20-17 win in Oxford over then number 6 Ole Miss. The Rebels dropped down to number 12. Josh Caddis, I think is how you say his last name, got a game-winning 2-yard touchdown run. It was his only touch, at least rushing. I'm not sure if he got a reception in the game, but his only carry in this one. And then late, the Rebels missed a potential game-tying field goal that would have sent it to overtime. The Wildcats defense held a very explosive Ole Miss offense led by Jackson Dart to just 250 yards and 10 points outside of that 6-play, 83-yard scoring drive to open it. Is Ole Miss done? I think that's an overreaction. I don't think the Rebels are done. I think this loss, though, with who they have left on their schedule, it is a little bit easier when it comes to SEC schedules, but they still have some challenges yet to play. I don't think they're done, certainly in the college football playoff race, but I think Texas has impressed quite a bit more than they have. Alabama has impressed. I think even Georgia in that loss to Alabama has impressed. Tennessee has really impressed. I think there's 4 teams that I think at this point are better than this Rebels team. And really, because of this head-to-head now, they've still got Kentucky that I think is going to be ahead of them. Kentucky is 3-2. They've shown that they can play with these contenders. I don't think they're seriously a contender, but they'll have a chance to prove that. November 2nd, they're on the road at Tennessee. They showed in a road game in a hostile environment at Vaught Hemingway Stadium against the Rebels that they can play, that they can hang around. And then they play, well, not just hang around, that they can win. Much more important than that. And then they also go on the road to Austin to face Texas on November 23rd. So I think Kentucky legitimately has a chance to compete in the SEC. Now, do I think they'll be able to deliver? And they already have, with 2 losses already, probably not. But I think they're going to give both of those teams some trouble. And outside of that, I can see the Wildcats winning the rest of their games. I think they go to Florida this year. That's also a little bit tough if Florida can figure things out. They seem to be heading in that direction. They got a big one coming up against UCF up next. But I think Kentucky has certainly proven that they can hang with the top dogs in the SEC and get a huge road win and the upset over the number 6 team in the country. Moving into a little bit of ranked matchups, number 20 23 Kansas State. They're up to 20 now. Dominated really Oklahoma State, who drops out of the top 25, 42-20. Avery Johnson kind of rebuilt his Heisman hype with 5 total touchdowns after a little bit of a lackluster performance in their blowout loss at BYU last week. DJ Giddens also ran for 187 yards for 12.5 yards per carry. A lot of pop from the Wildcats running back. And the Cowboys' stock continues to plummet, continues to slip out of the Big 12 contention. They're 0-2 now. They're going to have to win out to really seriously contend in the conference. And the way that Alan Bowman and Ollie Gordon have struggled so far, I don't think they're going to be turning it around anytime soon. And I think the Big 12 is getting super competitive. I'll save that for later in this video. But I think that's it for Oklahoma State, and I think Kansas State gets a big bounce back. That was a tough environment to go into to Provo last week, a late game. I think they proved that they're still there. I do think, though, Oklahoma State, back-to-back losses now to Utah and Kansas State, is not as good as some people thought they would be. I kind of saw that some of the areas that they had last year, even with the success that Gordon had, they didn't rank very high in terms of moving the ball, either rushing or total offense. Defensively, they had some struggles, and I think those have popped up this year and have resulted in losses. So I'm not too surprised by the way Oklahoma State has struggled. I am a little bit impressed by Kansas State, though I think a little bit of, which team will show up. Will it be the team that lost to BYU, or will it be a team that dominated Arizona and also dominated Oklahoma State? Speaking of Arizona, the Wildcats defense completely stopped Utah, who was number 10, dropped down to number 18. Noah Fifita to Kean Burnett, a Servite connection. Those two guys were teammates in Anaheim at Servite High School there, to go up 23-10 with about 8 minutes left in that one. Fifita threw for 197 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. His leading receiver has been kind of covered at times this season. Totoroa McMillan, 6 receptions for 50 yards. That's been something to watch. It seems like defenses have really been keying in on him this year. He had one big game this year, but other than that has been a little bit, found it a little bit more difficult to get those big plays. But it's a huge win for Arizona, and I think it really opens up the Big 12 race. And I guess I'll get into that right now since I'm talking about these Big 12 games right now. I think this Big 12 race has intensified, and it has really opened up. You've got 5 teams right now that are still undefeated in conference. BYU and Colorado are leading the way at 2-0. Big win for the Buffaloes. They were 15-point underdogs, and they get a dominant 48-21 win over Central Florida in Orlando. Obviously, another big game from Travis Hunter, who is really, at this point, as long as he, God forbid, doesn't get hurt, he will be in New York for the Heisman ceremony, and a good game for Shedeur Sanders as well. This Colorado team has proven so far they've had 1 bad game, and they've had 4 fairly good games. North Dakota State, they struggled a little bit, but they dominate here against UCF, so they go to 2-0. And then 3 other teams, Iowa State, whose head coach, Matt Campbell, became the winningest coach in the school's history. Arizona and West Virginia, I believe, are all 1-0. They're all undefeated. Meanwhile, Utah and Kansas State both have a loss each, and obviously mentioned Oklahoma State. They've got 2. So this is a wide open race. I think it's very competitive, and any one of those 5 teams, we knew going into the season that it was going to be a competitive conference, but the teams that we expected to maybe lead the way, like Utah, like Oklahoma State, and even Kansas State, have kind of slipped back a little bit to teams like a rising Iowa State or BYU especially. I think BYU has been the most surprising in the Big 12 so far. Shifting gears over to, I guess we're going to call it independence and ACC coverage here. Number 14, Notre Dame, getting the bump up from number 16, steps up with a late stand against then number 15, Louisville, who drops down to 22nd. The Fighting Irish, again, kind of struggled offensively. They had just 250 yards of offense and 2 turnovers, but they were able to get 3 takeaways, and they also stopped the Cardinals 3 times in this game on downs, including a late stop, leading by a touchdown. I think the Cardinals have proven that they can compete in the SEC, or in the ACC, but they have a really tough, really vital 3-game slate kind of in the midway point of the season coming up here in a few weeks. They're home against number 8 Miami. More about the Hurricanes in the next point here. They're at 4-1 Boston College on a Friday night game, October 25th, And then they're at number 15 Clemson, November 2nd, a Tigers team who is really starting to build after that loss against Georgia. Their offense has been one of the best in college football since that defeat. Louisville, they showed in this game they can compete with a really good team like Notre Dame. For the Fighting Irish, for their status, they show again that they can show up for these games against ranked or quality opponents. The problem is they don't have many of those left. A team that we really expected to be pretty good this year, Florida State, gets another loss. They get drilled at SMU in the Mustangs conference opener. Florida State's 1-4. Notre Dame, unless they play like they did against Northern Illinois and Miami, Ohio, they shouldn't have a problem in that one. Their big game is against USC, who I'll talk about later. But overall, it's a good win for the Fighting Irish, and I think Louisville, because this is not a conference loss, they're still very much in contention for the college football playoff, because I think they can match up well against the Hurricanes after what we saw on Friday night. And here is a big point that I want to go over from the Week 5 action. Number 7, Miami, who's down a spot to number 8, was really, I think, bailed out, and I think Virginia Tech was arguably robbed in the game Friday night. There was a crazy final few plays, kind of a final drive, some really good plays by Cam Ward, who had exactly 400 total yards and 5 touchdowns, 4 passing and 1 rushing. He did also throw an interception, but played really well. Then it came down ultimately to an insane final play. Kyron Jones threw a Hail Mary from the Miami 30. It was originally caught by Daquan Felton. It was a great play by the Hokies receiver, and it was initially ruled as a catch on the field. It took a moment, kind of a little bit of chaos on the field in this play. Debatedly, the play before kind of looked a little bit like a PI. That wouldn't have affected too much, though. It would have moved it to the 15, which arguably there's not as much space to work with. I mean, when Miami is playing, a 3-deep defense or maybe a dime package, they're going to have all the DBs in there down in the end zone anyways. But back to the call, because that was the important thing here. It initially looked like Felton made the catch, but the ruling was, which was very hotly contested and debated that night, over the weekend, and probably will still be, maybe throughout the entire race, especially if Miami comes down to being a game, a game separation of making the ACC championship game or making the college football playoff. It'll come back to this point right here. It was overturned. The explanation for it was that it was touched by a Miami defender who was out of bounds. I think that sort of ruling, I imagine, I'm not 100% sure, but I am 99% sure that is accurate according to the rule. I think the question is, though, it's kind of an iffy rule. The receiver makes a phenomenal play, and because they were down just 38-34, this would have been the game-winning touchdown. It's not like this sends the game to overtime, or a play like the next one I'm going to talk about here in terms of refs kind of making maybe the wrong call late in the game. This one would have given Virginia Tech the win. It would have boosted the Hokies' chances. They have 2 losses. One of those is out of in non-conference play to Vanderbilt. So they, with a win here, would have very much still been in ACC contention, especially beating the team that going into this week was the top dog in the ACC. It changes a lot of things for the Hokies. It keeps, playoff chances alive for Miami and keeps them somewhat as the favorite in the ACC. I think Clemson is making a case that they're right there with them. I think even Louisville, even in that loss, proves that they're kind of in the discussion. Maybe even Boston College, they're 4-1. They scraped by Western Kentucky with a 21-20 win. They were without Thomas Castellanos, though, so that probably wasn't evidence of their best football. But ACC race is wide open here, kind of similarly to the Big 12. I think it's opening up. A team like a favorite like Florida State is out of the picture, so now other teams are kind of fighting for that opportunity to get there. And even SMU getting their first conference win as well is big. But like I was talking about, in controversial rulings, shifting gears over to the Big 10 now. This will probably be my last main point before one to wrap this video up. Number 12, Michigan. I think also was bailed out by the refs against Minnesota. A late onside kick in a 27-24 game was recovered by the Golden Gophers, but it was ruled offside. However, I do want to put a little disclaimer out on here. It's debatable whether the ball was touched before it's even recovered anyways, so maybe it doesn't matter. It'd be illegal touching, so that's, I forget, illegal touching if it's a re-kick or if Michigan gets the ball. Either way, would have been chopped off anyways. Michigan recovers the second onside kick. However, Fox Rules analyst Mike Pereira said he didn't think that the Minnesota player was offside. So Big Ten is also, according to CBS, I believe, reviewing this play. Not like they can really change anything in retrospect. But it would have set the Golden Gophers up with a chance, needing only a field goal with, I think, something like a minute left in this game. Kind of a bailout. Again, they might not have scored. Minnesota might not have scored, so it might not have even mattered. But they should at least have been given the opportunity. I think Michigan gets away with something with a win here. For the Wolverines, though, issues continue to persist at quarterback. Alex Orji in this game had an interception and a fumble. It was recovered, but overall, the offensive issues continue for the Wolverines. Kalel Mullings did a good job running the ball, but something that Joel Klatt mentioned in his weekly rundown of the games is the Wolverines weren't able to really string drives together like in the game against USC. They pop off the big runs, which is enough. They've proven that can be enough, but maybe not the same level of what they used to be, just driving down the field again and again. Another big game staying in the Big Ten here. Number 9, Penn State. Their defense completely shut down. Then number 19, Illinois, who drops down to number 24 in a 21-7 win. Singleton and Allen, the Lions running backs, both ran in a touchdown each, and Penn State is up to number 7. Two more quick stories. Jeremiah Smith is competing with Ryan Williams as the most talented, most decorated true freshman receiver and true freshman overall, and maybe even receiver overall in college football. He had a couple of highlight reel catches and an end around, ran in for a touchdown as Ohio State kind of flexed their muscles in a road win in their first semi-test against Michigan State on the road. I think also you can't, with the play of Smith, you can't overlook a player like Emeka Egbuka, who had 96 receiving yards and a touchdown as well. Will Howard did a good job again at quarterback. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson didn't have a lot of carries or yards, but they both did pretty well in this game. And the Buckeyes get a dominant road win in what was their first real tough-ish opponent. I don't think the Spartans are great this year, but certainly a higher caliber than the Buckeyes' first 3 opponents. Finally, Big Ten point here, USC was down 21-10 at halftime against Wisconsin at home. They rattle off 28 straight. Miller Moss throws 4 touchdown passes as the Trojans are able to get what ended up being a pretty comfortable win, 38-21 for their first Big Ten win. So those are the observations from the Big Ten. I think Ohio State is the favorite. Oregon, if they play like they did against Oregon State, is probably number 2. Penn State with their defense and being able to do enough on offense is probably number 3. Michigan is 4, and they're only ahead of USC because they won that head-to-head. I think those teams are pretty on level footing, and I think that proved itself last week. But finally, last point here, talked about Avery Johnson being a Heisman contender, talked about Travis Hunter being a Heisman contender. But what about Ashton Jeanty at Boise State? Number 21 Broncos dominated Washington State in a 45-24 win. The Broncos running back is averaging 120.7 yards per half. The reason I'm saying that, he was subbed out for the second half of the game against Portland State. So 4 games, 8 halves, subtract 1. So he's averaging over 120 yards per half. He's rushed for 845 yards and 13 touchdowns at a rate of 10.3 yards per carry. A lot of people aren't seeing it as much because it's out on the West Coast. The games are later. But he has proven that he is a very, very talented running back, and I think has shown as potentially the best player in college football so far. I think if he keeps up the level that he's playing at right now, he will be in New York as well. And I think this Broncos team, really, I believe, is going to be able to, I think, cruise through the Mountain West pretty comfortably. And their resume, they're already a top 25 team. They're already the highest ranked group of 5 team. Although UNLV entered the picture, a lot going on there. Let me know if you want me to go over that situation in a video here on the channel. Although UNLV enters, if Boise State can get through the Rebels and the rest of the Mountain West, they're going to be going to the college football playoff as the highest ranked group of 5 team. But that's it. Bit of a longer video. I'm also going to break these up, so you might see a couple of videos in the coming days, or maybe later Tuesday or whatever, whenever I post these, of kind of the individual points. But if you enjoyed this video and stuck around to this point, thank you so much for taking the time to watch College Football Talk. If this video is interesting or you think somebody else would be intrigued by it, please share this video and get it out there and let people know what's been going on in college football. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.